So we've made it through Jewish history from sort of pre-biblical times into the contemporary period, and today we'll close out our unit on Judaism by looking at some of the major holidays practiced by Jews, and we're going to begin with Rosh Hashanah, or the New Year. This is an autumnal festival, also known as the Feast of Trumpets, which refers to the blowing of the shofar, or ceremonial ram's horn. That's that. In biblical times, the shofar was blown to announce the coronation of a king, and here it's used to ring in a generally 2-day celebration of the new year. Rosh Hashanah is the new year for people, animals, plants, and it's understood by many to be the anniversary of the creation of Adam and Eve, as well as the anniversary of the Akedah, or binding of Isaac that we saw, if you remember that Caravaggio image that we saw. So the reciprocal relationship between God and his people, which we've talked about, is alive here. This holiday emphasizes the human dependence on God as a sustainer, as well as God's dependence on the human community to make his presence known on earth. A standard greeting on Rosh Hashanah is Shana Tova, or Good Year. It's common to eat honey or apples or something else that reminds us of the sweetness of God's creation. As if we could forget. And another standard greeting is, "May you be inscribed and sealed for a good new year." So what does this mean, inscribed and sealed? Well, for Jews, Rosh Hashanah is the day on which God opens the books of account, or the books of judgment, and records each person's fate for the coming year. When these books are open, Jews begin a period of self-reflection, taking stock of their moral selves and really working to reconcile themselves to the good. So you think back on the year and you think, where have I screwed up? In what relationships have I been less generous? Have I been less honest? Have I been less forthcoming than I could have been? And you really try to get good with the better self that we all, recognize, but recognize our distance from. So this is a practice known, we'll go back to this, as teshuvah, or turning around. And it's when people seek to come back to their better selves. It's not exactly repentance. It's just a turning around to that self that is within you. Folks do this by acknowledging their failings and committing themselves to living a more righteous life in the coming year. Like, I'm going to do better, And one way that these folks often do this is through the Tashlik prayers, which is what we see here. On the afternoon of the first day of Rosh Hashanah, one offers prayers of repentance near naturally flowing water and symbolically casts one's sins into that water. And the hope is that in the 10 days from Rosh Hashanah to Yom Kippur, one will cleanse oneself sufficiently of sin and dedicate oneself thoroughly enough to walking in the way of the Lord that on Yom Kippur, when God is believed to seal the books of account, one will find inscribed. One will find oneself inscribed and sealed into the book of life, which is where the righteous go. So there's the shofar again, and here we have Yom Kippur, which is the holiest day of the Jewish year. It is the Sabbath of Sabbaths, the most important holiday, because it's on Yom Kippur that humans seek to reconcile themselves to God. And God, in turn, is believed to take stock of each individual. It's the day of judgment or remembrance or atonement, and Jews fast for 25 hours because of the way that the day is seen to begin and end. And we'll talk about that with the Sabbath. 25 hours concentrating on prayer and repentance, on getting good with their better selves, on reconciliation. So often, in an effort to cleanse the body, the more completely to concentrate on the soul, Jews immerse themselves in a mikveh, a pool for ritual purification. And this is when, dating to the 1st century CE, in the time of Jesus, biblical scholars just look back, and in the time of Jesus, that community, that turn of the century community in Israel, there were tons of these. We find them all over the place. So this one is the 1st century CE. Here's a contemporary one in Australia. So they're comfortable places where which are used for all manner of reasons. A woman following menstruation must go in the mikveh before she has sex with her husband. Following childbirth, mikveh before she has sex with her husband. The high priest back in the time of the temple, before on Yom Kippur, the holiest day of the year, before he went into the Holy of Holies, that sacred sanctum within the temple, which was the holiest place on the holiest day of the year, the person in the position of the holiest sense of authority would immerse himself in a mikveh before he went in there. So it's not simply women, but it's in large part used for women. And Jewish law states that if you're going to build a synagogue in your community, you have to first build a mikveh. You can't dedicate funds to building a place of study and teaching before you build this ritual purification bath. So That's often used. Jews often immerse themselves in a mikveh preceding Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur is understood as the anniversary of the Israelites receiving atonement for having turned to idolatry while Moses was receiving the Torah on Mount Sinai. It's a solemn day of seeking forgiveness and reorienting oneself to the good, but it carries with it an undertone of joy, the joy of knowing that the relationship with God is being maintained. So on the fifth day after Yom Kippur, there's a stark transition to the festival of to a festival of total joy. Um, Sukkot. Sukkot means booths, and Jews built a sukkah or booth to celebrate this week-long pilgrimage festival. There are 3 pilgrimage festivals in the Jewish ritual calendar, and we'll look at the other 2 in just a minute. For each of the pilgrimage festivals, before the temple was destroyed, Israelites would make a pilgrimage to the temple to celebrate. This is why they're known as pilgrimage festivals. They don't generally involve pilgrimages today, but Sukkot is a harvest festival as well as a reminder of the 40 years during which the Israelites wandered in the desert, living in booths before they reached the promised land. So it's also understood to be a celebratory festival for those who were sealed into the book of life, the righteous ones, sealed into the book of life on Yom Kippur. And to celebrate, one builds a booth, a sukkah. Its roof must be made of organic material. You should be able to see the night sky through it. And it's a good idea to decorate it festively. It's in the sukkah that Jews will dwell for the duration of the festival. For most, dwelling means taking one's meals in the sukkah, hosting guests in it, enjoying time with friends and family in it. Some folks sleep in their sukkah for a week. For most of the days of Sukkot, Jews are allowed to do any work that's needed to be done to prepare for or engage in festival activities, but they are not allowed to do any work that's onerous or any chores that don't have to do with the festival and that are considered a drag. You're just not allowed to do that kind of work during this festival, which is cool. It's a happy time of harvest and community. And then deeper into the winter comes Hanukkah. The first thing to mention is that Hanukkah is, religiously speaking, a minor holiday. It became increasingly popular through the 20th century as Jews found themselves living in ostensibly secular environments amongst primarily Christian populations who were celebrating Christmas at about the same time. The name Hanukkah comes from the root to dedicate, and the holiday traces its roots to the time of the Maccabean revolt and the institution of the Hasmonean dynasty, which we looked at in the last lecture. Remember that when the Seleucids were trying desperately to Hellenize the Jews, one thing they did was defile the temple in any way they could think of. So they built a pagan altar and statues to pagan gods, sacrificed non-kosher animals, and tried, sometimes successfully, to force Jews to eat that meat. Having endured all manner of violence, oppression, and indignity, the Jews, led by the Maccabees, drove the Seleucids from the city and rededicated the temple to their god. We've heard this, lighting a makeshift menorah, but finding only 1 day's worth of consecrated oil, the rest having been destroyed by the Seleucids. Now, miraculously, the oil burned for the entire 8 days that it took to press and consecrate more oil. So Hanukkah commemorates this miracle, as well as the miracle of a small, untrained Jewish army using guerrilla tactics to defeat a far larger, professionalized Greek army. So resistance to very strong Hellenizing forces was successful in the 2nd century BCE, and today celebrations of Hanukkah help Jews to maintain and foster a strong sense of cultural identity amidst the flurry of, silver bells and Christmas shopping that happens around this time. Now, Purim is a carnival, and it traces its roots to the biblical book of Esther, which incidentally is the only book in the Hebrew Bible in which the name of God does not appear. The book of Esther tells the story of a great conspiracy led by Haman, who's a bad guy, to destroy the Jewish people utterly. And the skillful means employed by Esther and her cousin Mordecai, he's a good guy. Mordecai and Esther are in cahoots and related to save them. So these two save the Jews. This one wants to destroy them. These two save them. And the events recounted in the narrative are believed to have taken place in about the 4th century BCE. The holiday now falls in early spring. It's very festive. There are costumes, lots of food, and often a great deal of drinking. In the Talmud, which we talked about as the written form of the oral Torah, it's said that on Purim, one should feast and drink until one cannot tell the difference between the phrases, "Cursed be Haman," and "Blessed be Mordecai." So as soon as you can't tell the difference, and as soon as you mix them up and you don't know the difference between the two, then you've had enough to drink. So for many Jewish communities, Purim is a time of drunken revelry. For all, There's been some backlash against this as alcohol has come to be seen as a substance that's often abused, but that's part of the tradition. And for all, it's a festive holiday. It's a celebration of survival. Something that we've seen in each of the holidays we've looked at is this sense that in memory, a past event can be brought into the present. It's not just a looking back, it's a bringing forward. Memory isn't backward looking here, it's more of a making present. And this is especially apparent with Passover, one of Judaism's 3 pilgrimage festivals. We talked about the Exodus narrative to which this holiday traces its roots, and the last of the plagues when the angel of death took every firstborn in Egypt but passed over the houses where the blood of a sacrificial lamb was smeared on the doorpost. Passover, or Pesach, is now a week-long celebration of freedom and hope. All leavening agents, or chametz, are removed from the home. Leavening, like as in something that makes the bread rise. Removed from the home the day before Passover begins in remembrance of the haste with which the Israelites fled Egypt before their bread could rise, hence the matzah. And no leavening agents are consumed during the duration of this holiday. The Passover Seder, or ritual meal, Seder actually means order, but it's the ritual meal, follows a script known as the Haggadah. Let's go new on this. The Seder, Passover Seder, follows the Haggadah. There's a lot of these. Some of them are very fun. I happen to have a claymation one. Follows this. The meal follows this script through which the events of the Exodus are discussed and symbolically reenacted in a way that draws in. It's the youngest son who always asks the question, and so it's a holiday about drawing in the young to recreate the events of the past as a way of remembering. Each food item that sits on the Passover plate, and you can see here that it's really divided up to hold a bunch of food items, is symbolic of a different aspect of the narrative. And here we have the very first Passover Seder held in the White House, which was just a few years ago now. I mean, it took a long. We see that President Obama is the first president to host that. So the third and final pilgrimage festival is Shavuot, or Weeks, which commemorates the moment when the scales were tipped in humanity's favor through God's giving of the Torah to Moses, and we've seen this image. It's 7 weeks after Passover, and while it, along with Passover, commemorates events in the religious history of the Jews, it also commemorates an annual agricultural event that tied the people to the land. Passover is the start of the barley harvest, and Shavuot marks the harvest's end. And we've noted throughout our unit here that Judaism is a really embodied faith in constant relationship with the material of this earth. And that point is evident in what is arguably the most important Jewish holy day. Most important even though and because it's the most common. The Shabbat, or Sabbath, begins each week on Friday evening and ends on Saturday evening when the first 3 stars are visible on the eastern horizon. So when is that? I mean, there's all kinds of clocks now. You could sort of get an app for your cell phone that'll tell you when it's happening in your time zone. But really, the point is that you have to be outside. You've got to go outside to know when this is happening. And it's going to depend on whether you live in mountains or you live in a broad, vast sort of prairie region. I mean, it is embodied. It is localized. It's tied to where you're at. And you really got to look at the sky to know what time it is. Jews are called over and over and over to be in touch with the world around them. Practicing, observant, especially Orthodox Jews, save all week. They work all week so that for one day they can come to a full stop, no working. This isn't a time to rest so that you can work better. It's not like rejuvenating so that you can be a better, a better minion in this world. It's not the point. The Sabbath is not for the sake of the week. The week is for the sake of the Sabbath, and Sabbath is for the sake of life. It's understood by the rabbis to be a time to come together with community, to eat food, to make love, to be grateful. So I'll close with a quote from Abraham Joshua Heschel, whom you should get to know. He's a 20th century rabbi, and he said this. He said, "The Sabbath is a palace in time, a time for each person to enter the holiness of the day, lay down the clatter and clamor of commerce and the betrayal of embezzling his own life. He must realize that the earth has already been created, and it will survive without him for 27 hours. 6 days, we steward the world. On the 7th, we steward ourselves." So it's a nice thought to close on, and there you have Judaism. The next unit we'll turn to is Christianity, but in between now and then, as you prepare for your Judaism quiz, just remember that you really, in order to do well in this world, in order to be successful, you really do need to remember that there is this self-stewardship that goes on, and that's something that the Jewish tradition can really offer to us.